Good morning and welcome back to our Parsha webcast. This week is the Parsha of Toldot, and the Parsha of Toldot in it the Torah discusses primarily the events that took place with the second of the three patriarchs, our father Yitzchak. Yitzchak has two children after many years. I'm going to do this briefly. His wife finally becomes pregnant with twins, Yaakov and Esav. They're both born. Yaakov turns out to be the youngest son. Esav was born first. And the Torah describes them very differently. Esav was a man of the field, a hunter, and Yaakov was a man of the tents. He sat and learned. He was a holy individual, a wholesome person. Eventually, the Torah tells us that Esav came home one day from the field, very tired, and Yaakov happened to be preparing some lentil soup, and Esav asked him for some of it, and Yaakov made a deal with him that if he would give up on his birthright, and sell him the birthright for the soup, he will gladly give him some soup, and Esav did that, and that's what we have, where Yaakov, even though he was born after Esav, he becomes the firstborn in right, because he bought it from Esav. After that, we have a number of events that happen with Yitzchak, with Avimelech, and the argument that he had with Avimelech's well diggers, and they fought over different wells, and finally Yitzchak digs a well and they leave him alone, and that's also a whole subject on its own. What is this business with the Torah emphasizing so much about digging wells? I mean, what really is the significance of all of it? And the Torah spends so much time and so many verses, not only in this portion but in others as well. There's obviously some spiritual importance to digging wells, which we'll leave for a different time. But the main story of this week's portion, if you will, is the second half. And that is, Esav gets married to women who are not very, very holy at all. As the verse describes them, they were a provocation of the spirit of Isaac and to Rebekah. They caused them anguish, tremendous anguish, and that's because they were idol worshippers. And Yitzchak saw this. And imagine the terrible agmas nefesh, the terrible anguish he had over this, him and Rivka had over this. The next thing that we're told is that Yitzchak grew old and became blind. And he calls in his son Esav, his oldest son, and says, I'd like you to go fetch me a catch, a meal, prepare a meal for me, and I'll bless you. And these blessings were going to be the blessings for all time. Whoever received those blessings was destined to greatness. And Esav goes out, and he goes to hunt and to prepare this meal, anticipating to receive the blessings from his father. What happens there is something amazing. Rivka, from behind the door, heard the conversation that Yitzchak was having with her older son, Esav. Now, Rivka wanted that these blessings should not end up being given to Esav, because she felt it would be a waste. He wouldn't know how to appreciate those blessings. He wasn't destined to greatness, and it would be a waste. So she had Yaakov. She told Yaakov, listen, go prepare a meal. I'll prepare you a meal, bring it to your father, and present yourself as Esav. And this was a deception if you think about it. She not only told him to present himself as Esav, but she actually clothed him in the clothings of Esav, because Torah describes earlier that Esav was born very hairy. He was like an animal in a way. He had hair like an animal. And of course, if he would come over to Yitzchak and he would touch him, he would immediately see, but first of all, they hear his voice, and see this is not Esav's voice, and therefore he'd be suspicious. He'd feel him out to see if he's indeed Esav. He'll see right away he has smooth skin, like a human being, like Yaakov. He's not gonna, not only won't he bless him, he'll even curse him. So his mother goes and puts him on hairy clothing, and then on his hands and his neck, he puts him on fur to make it as if this is really Esav. Yaakov goes there, and she tells him, "If don't worry, if he curses you because of this, if he catches on and he curses you, the curse is on me." She took responsibility. Anyway, to make the long story short, Yaakov goes and brings the meal, and Yitzchak is there, he doesn't see, and he says, "So fast? That was quick, right? It usually takes some time." So Yaakov says, "God prepared, a quick one, So right away, Yitzchak became suspicious. He's invoking God's name. He's talking about God. Esav never mentioned God's name. So right away, he was suspicious. When does Esav talk about God? So he says, "Are you sure that you're Esav?" "Yes, I'm Esav." And this whole thing, and he calls him over, he feels him, and he kissed him, and he smelled this clothing of Esav. And he said, "You happen to have the voice of Yaakov, but your hands are the hands of Esav." But at the end, he was convinced that it was Esav, and he gave him the most incredible blessings. Now Esav comes back with his meal. As Yaakov is leaving, Esav is entering. And he says, "Father, I brought you the meal, please bless me." So Yaakov now, Yitzchak now trembled. He realized what had happened. And he said, "Your brother just came, and this with wisdom, he outsmarted all of us, and he got the blessings. What can I do?" So Esav started crying, "Can't you bless me also? You have only one blessing." And he blessed him. And he said, the real blessings were given already to Yaakov. As a result, while he was having this conversation with Yitzchak, he says, "This boy Yaakov, this is the second time he's deceiving me." So Yitzchak says, "What's the first time? What's going on?" So he says, "Well, many years ago, and the story with the firstborn, and he made me sell him the birthright for a little soup, and he deceived me there." So Yitzchak, when he heard that, he felt much calmer, because now was very nervous by the fact that he blessed Yaakov with the blessings of the firstborn. So he felt like he did an injustice. He did something unjust. But when he heard the Esav say that this is the second time he deceived me, and that he had sold the birthright to Yaakov, he said, "Oh, if that's the case, then I didn't do anything wrong. He deserved the blessings." So he now felt much better that he understood that Yaakov was right. He ends up blessing Esav, but not like Yaakov. There was already a different kind of blessing. He blessed him with wealth and riches of the physical world, and not the spiritual blessings that the Jewish people got and became the great Jewish people. But Esav now developed a tremendous hatred to Yaakov, and he decided he's going to kill him. And Rivka got wind of it, and she told Yaakov, "Therefore you got to run away, you got to leave the house, your brother's too angry." And that's when Yitzchak and Rivka sent Yaakov away to Rivka's brother Lavan. And that's how the Torah portion ends this week. Next week we see the story of Yaakov in the house of Lavan. What I want to do today is zero in. This is going to be interesting. We'll do something different. We'll take a Rashi that most, when you read it, it's another Rashi, but we'll analyze this Rashi, and we'll get a better understanding of what the story here is. And the Rashi we're going to analyze today is on page 291. So if you will, turn to page 291 and we'll read this. We'll start with the verse. You have a chumash?
Do you have no. Do you have
There's another one.
I don't want to read because I don't have glasses. Sitting here.
No. You sure?
No. I can't read.
Okay.
Without glasses.
So the Torah tells us in the beginning of chapter 27. It's actually on page 290, the last line in the text of the Torah. Page 290, chapter 27 in Genesis. It reads as follows. And it was when Isaac had become old and his eyes dimmed from seeing, that he summoned Esav, his oldest son, and said to him, and that's when the story continues, go bring me the food and I'll bless you. Rashi now, if you take a look on page 291, the first Rashi, he zeroes in on the word, on this thing that Yitzchak became, his eyes dimmed. He couldn't see anymore, but went blind in his old age. So Rashi tells us, and his eyes dimmed. I want to read this Rashi with you. He gives 3 reasons why his eyes dimmed, why he became blind. Reason number 1, Ba'ashonon shel Elu, through the smoke of these wives of Esav, for they would raise smoke and burn incense to idols. And that smoke, they did this so much that the smoke ended up going into, you live in such a, in that environment, the smoke ends up getting into you and it takes its toll, and that's what made him blind. Alternatively, he gives another reason. When he was bound upon the altar, and his father wanted to slaughter him, at that time the heavens opened up, and the ministering angels saw what was happening to him. And they were crying. Their tears descended and fell on Isaac's eyes. This is why this is why his eyes dimmed. What happened was the angels were crying. The Jewish people are going to be killed there. That's it. There's no other. It's the end. He's killing the one Jew that's alive. Is Yitzchak, and that's it. So what's the future? There is no future for the future Jewish people. So they began to cry, the angels, and those tears dripped into Yitzchak's eyes, and that's what made him blind. That's the second reason why he's blind. And the third, he gives a third reason. He's still not satisfied. He gives a third reason. Alternatively, his eyes dimmed so that Jacob should take the blessings. God, so to say, arranged it that he should be blind, so that Yaakov should be able to do this deception and get the blessings for himself rather than the blessings go to Esav. Understood? 3 basic reasons, no big story, very interesting. Okay. So I want to share with you an essay of the Rebbe on this Rashi. But before I do that, I want to share with you some fundamentals in the way, in the rules of Rashi. Rashi is here for one reason, we know. And he says it. I am here, my commentary on the Chumash is for one reason. To explain the simple meaning of the verse. So when the 5-year-old learns Chumash, he should be able to understand if he has any question that arises in the simple verse, I'm here to answer that question. To explain the simple meaning of the verse. I'm not here to explain esoteric ideas, agadic ideas, homiletic ideas. I'm here to explain the simple meaning. He takes us through to understand the basic words of the Torah. And Rashi doesn't either just splurge with the reason, commentary. He only is very specific. He only explains what's necessary to understand the simple meaning of the verse. Therefore, this Rashi, is very difficult to understand. First of all, why does he give 3 reasons? You want to tell us why he went blind? Give us one reason. That explains it. Once you have a reason, there's no more questions. You know the reason. If you're going to give a second reason, it's because the first reason is not really good enough. That's the rule of Rashi. Whenever he gives a second and a third reason, it's because the first reason is not quite, it's not good enough. It's still, there's too, the first reason, the 5-year-old learning the Chumash or the 20-year-old learning the Chumash, and he sees that's the reason, the first reason, he still has a question. It doesn't quite answer it smoothly, so therefore he gives another reason. And also, the rule is that when he gives 3 reasons, and he does them 1, 2, and 3, there's a reason why the first reason is the first, and the second reason is the second, and the third reason is the third. Because the first reason, obviously, is the main reason. Then, because there's a problem with the first reason, he gives a second. Why does he give a third? Because there's a problem with both of the first two, and therefore he needs a third. It's very, very interesting. Rashi, everything is exact, it's precise. So with this in mind, let's start analyzing this Rashi. So why do we need, the first question that comes to mind is, why does Rashi even have to give any reason why he became blind? The Pasuk says why he became blind. He grew old. And there's no old people, we can look around, and you see that old people, old age has an effect on the eyes, and they dim. Some people can't see well when they're on it. It's a normal, natural phenomenon. There's nothing. In other words, when someone reads this verse, it was when Yitzchak became old, and his eyes dimmed. There's no question. There's no reason why Rashi even needs to give a commentary. The verse himself says why he became old. Why does Rashi have to add 3 more reasons on top of that? Or why does he have to add anything on top of that? That's the first question. And then the second is, of course, we need to know why he's giving 3 reasons. Why is 1 not enough, or even 2 not enough? He needs 3 reasons. That means there's a problem with all 3 reasons which 1 doesn't satisfy, and therefore all 3 together work. With all 3 together, it answers. What's the reason for this? Okay, so now, here's the reason why Rashi is not satisfied. He feels he needs to make a comment over here. What does it say over here? Yitzchak grows old and his eyes dim. So you're asking, it's understood why he went dim. He's old. The problem is that when you look early in last week's portion, I want to refer you there. And this is look in the earlier portion, chapter 25, verse 11. It says over here like this. It was in the end of yesterday's portion. I'm going to read to you verse 11. It's on page 268. And it was after again, chapter 25 of Genesis, verse 11. And it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled near Beer Lachairoi. Why did God bless Yitzchak? So it says. Rashi tells us, look what Rashi tells us here. I refer you to the bottom, verse 11. And it was after the death of Abraham that God blessed, etc. He consoled him he consoled him the consolation. He gave him he comforted him more. That was the blessing. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, alternatively, although the Holy One, blessed be, he gave the blessings over to Abraham so he can bless whoever he wants. So why didn't Abraham bless Yitzchak? Why did he wait for God to bless Yitzchak? So Rashi says Abraham was afraid to bless Isaac because he foresaw Esau coming forth from him. So he wouldn't want to bless him. He was afraid. Am I blessing maybe it's the wrong thing to do? What am I blessing? That Esau should come from him. So he says, you know what? I'm going to keep quiet. Let the master of all blessings bless him if he wants. So Abraham didn't bless him. And God came and blessed Yitzchak. Clear? So God blesses Yitzchak. If God blessed Yitzchak, why didn't the blessing work? Why did he go blind? If you have a special blessing from God, and what's the blessing of God? Long life, good life. How is it that he goes blind for so many years? It's when you go blind, Rashi says, our sages tell us, a blind man is considered a dead man. Right? It's you're missing something so fundamental in life. So how could it be that after God himself blesses Yitzchak, he goes blind to the point where he has a lot, and he didn't go blind for the last 2 years of his life. How old was Yitzchak at this point when he blessed Isaac? When he blessed, Yaakov, this whole story with Yaakov and Esau, the deception? He was 123 years old at the time. How old did Yitzchak live? How long did Yitzchak live? 180 years. So he's 123, he's blind already. That means he's blind for 57 years, a third of his life. Almost a third of his life. That's called blessing? That's a man that was blessed by God? And let's go further a minute. Up till this point, in the Torah, a lot of people became old. Avram became old. Did he go blind? Did Noah go blind in his old age? Did Adam go blind in his old age? Did Mr. Shelach? All these individuals that lived very long lives and they grew old, none of them went blind. So it's not as if it was such a natural phenomenon that people should go blind. And on top of that, so you want to say that this started with Yitzchak. But God had blessed Yitzchak. So how could it be that someone that was blessed by God himself would have had such a terrible thing happen to him 2/3 into his life, where he's not considered alive? So therefore Rashi looks at this verse and says, there's something wrong here. That can't just be because he became old. This is a man that was blessed by God. He shouldn't be blind at this point. It goes in contradiction with the end of the last portion, when he's blessed by God. Therefore Rashi says, there must be another reason why he went blind. Old age alone wouldn't have made him blind. There has to be some side reason that caused him to go blind. So that's why Rashi gives us commentary. To begin with, he feels necessary to explain why he went blind. What's the first reason he gives? So Rashi says, he's thinking, why did he go blind? He says, probably the verses themselves, the Torah itself hints to why they went blind. Somewhere in those verses near the story of Yitzchak's going blind, there's a hint as to why he went blind. So he says, I have it. Take a look at page of 2 verses before Yitzchak goes blind. What does it say? And Esau was 40 years old. He took a wife, Judith, daughter of Be'eri, the Hittite, and Basmath, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite. He takes wives from the Hittite daughters. Who are the Hittites? They're the Chittim, they're the Canaanites, they're idol worshippers. And in fact it says, and they were a provocation of the spirit to Isaac and to Rivka. So what did they do? What was their provocation? They were idol worshippers. The Torah tells us they were idol worshippers. Probably that has something to do with why. That comes right in juxtaposition to the verse that talks about Yitzchak going blind. There's something there that made him blind. Something they did made him blind. What is it that they did? So the custom, how did they worship idols those days? They would offer offerings to the idols, bring incense to the idols, create a smoking environment, and so 2 + 2, 8 + 4. They offered incense to the idols. They created all the smoke in the house, and that caused them to go blind. So Rashi has the answer. He likes that explanation more than any other explanation. Why? Because that's hinted in the verses right near the story. So that's the first commentary. It's the smoke of these women that offer the incense to the idols that caused them to go blind. Fine? Understood? Good. The problem with this commentary, this reason, is a number of questions. That would mean that they would have, in other words, Esav gets married, right? What happens when someone gets married? I have a daughter, or I have a son, and he gets married. What a new couple gets married, where do they go? They stay living. They stay living in their father's house. They go and get their own apartment. So obviously, Esav and his wives didn't live in Yitzchak's house.
The smoke.
So once in a while, he went to visit them. So from that once in a while that he went to visit them, the smoke was so bad that it made him blind. There's something wrong over here, right? It doesn't make sense that he would go blind from idols they worshipped outside of his house. First of all, do you think they would come into his house and worship idols in his house? I mean, he wouldn't let them. It's his house, not theirs. And he didn't live in their house. So why would he have gone blind from their smoke that was in a distance? Question number 2, why did only he go blind from this? Why didn't Rivka go blind from this? I mean, if the smoke, it should blind everyone in the house. So Yitzchak is the only one that goes blind, not Rivka. So there's a problem with this reason, right? So for this reason, Rashi finds it necessary to offer another reason. It can't rely just on this reason because it doesn't really make too much sense. It's a problem.
When
right?
he offers another reason, is the first reason invalid?
No, it's not invalid, but it's weak on its own. That reason alone is weak.
Right.
So therefore he gives another reason. What's the other reason? The story with the Akedah, that the angels cried and it went into their eyes, into his eyes, and that blinded him. Okay. What's the third reason? So that Yaakov should be able to deceive him and get the blessings. Very nice. The problem with these two reasons also have major problems with him. What are the problems with these two reasons? Number 1, let's understand the second reason. The angels are crying in heaven, and their tears are dropping into Yitzchak's eyes. What in the world does that mean anyway? Angels have tears, and this is a physical tear that dropped into his eyes that made him blind physically. I mean, angels are not physical, and nor are their tears physical. So this whole reason is some homiletic explanation that when you read when you want a real reason why the guy go blind, this reason doesn't. Why did Yitzchak go blind? I say the guy, chas v'sholom. I take that back. Yitzchak is not a guy. I don't want to say that on Yitzchak. Why did he go blind? Because the spiritual angels cried the spiritual tears, and those spiritual tears made his physical eyes blind. That reason is a nice idea, but it doesn't. It's a problem. It doesn't answer the real physical, simple, simplistic reason why he went blind. Therefore he gives a third explanation. What's the third explanation? In order that Yaakov should be able to get the blessings. So God made him blind. Now, I ask you, when you hear that, in order for Yaakov to get the blessings, so therefore Hashem makes Yitzchak blind. What does this mean? In order for him to get a benefit, Hashem takes away my eyesight for 57 years. That makes any sense? That's not right. It goes against justice. It's an unjust thing to do, to make me blind and for him to get blessings. First of all, Hashem has many ways to make sure that Yaakov gets a blessing. He has to make Yitzchak blind for that. So that answer is also full of problems. So every one of these answers has full of problems. You had a question?
Yeah. What bothers me is since Isaac was being deceived, this whole thing with Rebecca and Jacob, making sure that Jacob gets everything and the blessings. It seems that God was going along with that, and that's exactly
the first. That's exactly what we're saying. It's totally unjust. If you feel that Yaakov needs to get the blessings, God has infinite he has infinite ways to arrange that Yaakov should get the blessing. He doesn't have to inflict such pain on the father, this holy Yitzchak, to deprive him of his eyesight and therefore consider him as if he's missing life in order for him to get a benefit. It's unjust, first of all. Second of all, God has so many different ways to do it. He doesn't have to revert to such unjust ways. This is a major problem. This answer, this explanation of Rashi that God made him blind because of that, is too difficult it doesn't stand on its own. So therefore Rashi feels it necessary to give three of these explanations. Three different explanations. And the problem with each one is obvious. The question is, why is this the first answer? This is the second, this is the third. He likes the first answer most, because it's hinted in the verses. So that he takes first. That's more valid. The Torah is kind of hinting as to why he went blind. It says right after the fact that the women were no good, so probably that's the reason why he went blind. Then he comes up with the second reason, the Akedah, the tears. Why is that the second reason? Because the third reason, that he made him blind so that Yaakov should take the blessing, that's the most difficult of all. It's so unjust, it's so wrong, it's more difficult than the second, even though the second one has its own problems. The fact that it's the spiritual tears falling into physical eyes, it's a homiletic answer. But it's still better than the third. Because at least it doesn't go against justice, against what's fair and right. So this is the reason why he enumerates these three reasons in the order that he does. But now I want to go to one more point. Does he need three reasons? Why can't he use two? Why can't he use two reasons? Why is two not enough? And the reason the Rebbe says, because when he gives three reasons, is because each one, if you're going to use any two, there's going to be a problem with those two. And this is, so let me share that with you as well. Let's take, for example, the first two reasons. Let's see if the first two reasons are enough on its own. What are the first two reasons? That is what the wives of Esav were causing the smoke to make him blind. And together with the second reason, which was the Akedah, right? Right? The story of the Akedah. Now, let's understand this. When did Yitzchak Esav get married? How old was Esav when he got married? He was 40. The Pasuk says he was 40. How old was Yitzchak when Esav was 40? Yitzchak had him when he was 60. So that means he was 100. When is this story? When did he go blind? 123. This is when he's 123. It says he went blind. Okay, so first of all, the man he's going to live 180 years. Would you consider someone that's 100, when he's going to live 180, is that old age? Not quite. It's just halfway. It's just a little bit more than halfway. Not quite considered old. So it would, then the problem is, look at the verse again. It says that first Yitzchak went old and then he became blind. According to this, and if you take the second reason, which is when he would, by the Akedah, how old was he by the Akedah? 37. At 37, he's certainly not an old man. So then the verse should have said the other way around. He was blind, and then he became old, and that's when this story happened. But it doesn't say that way. It says first he was old, and then he became blind. So Rashi those two reasons themselves don't stand, because it goes against the verses. So therefore he needs that third reason, that God made it happen when he was old. That's it.
Then if they don't stand, why doesn't he take them away from the list and just leave the one that makes more sense?
It's not, because each one doesn't, on their own, none of them is enough on their own. You need all three together. There's a problem with each one, and there's a problem with two, and therefore you need a third. You need all three. Two are not enough. And I'm explaining to you why each one on its own is not enough, and I'm even explaining to you why two are not enough. So I explained to you why the first two are not enough, you need a third. Let me explain to you why the first and the third are not good. What are the first and the third? If you would have just said the first answer and the third answer. First answer and the third answer is the story with the wife's smoke and the story with the deception, that God did it so he should be able to deceive him. The problem with this is, if you think about it, in that case, what's the reason he went blind? It's almost like embarrassing Yitzchak. Both reasons are an embarrassment to Yitzchak. One is his daughters-in-law were idol worshippers. And the second one is his son is such a no-goodnik that God has to make him do this whole thing to deceive him and to make him look that he wanted the blessed and not good child. Both reasons, in other words, if you just had those two reasons, it would turn out that that Yitzchak's going blind was, it's almost the Torah is telling us something terrible about Yitzchak. It's an embarrassment to him. Therefore, Rashi is not happy. That Rashi is not satisfied with those two reasons that would cast a negative light on Yitzchak. That his daughter-in-laws are terrible. He's making a mistake with wanting to bless his terrible son. This is not right. This is Yitzchak. Therefore, he gives a third answer. The third answer is the story with that Akedah. That's a beautiful answer.
Like a divine
that elevates
event.
him. Yitzchak is the man that was ready to be offered as an offering, and as a result of that, the angels were crying that he was going to die. That brings out the greatest honor of Yitzchak. So therefore, he feels it necessary that to have that answer as well. So you understand why to answer to your question, why he feels it necessary to put all three answers together. What's the great lesson of all of this? Great lesson over here is as follows. Hashem, the lesson is that you have to be careful not to speak disparagingly about anyone. Look what God did over here. Why did God make Yitzchak blind, according to the third reason? So that Yaakov should be able to deceive Yitzchak. Right? Why does he have to deceive him? Why did Rivka make this whole thing up? Because Rivka felt you're wasting your blessings by giving them to Esav. So Hashem could have come up with a very simple solution for this. Could have told Yitzchak in a prophetic vision, Yitzchak, your son Esav is not good. He's not a good boy. He's not what you think he is. Now, the Torah tells us before that Esav always fooled Yitzchak to make him think he's a religious man. He would present himself as religious, although he wasn't. And in the presence of Yitzchak, he was frum. He made himself to look like a frum guy, a religious, super religious guy. It's interesting. Rashi tells us in the earlier comment that Esav would come home and ask his father religious questions that he knew that for example, he asked him, how does one separate tithe salt? How do you tithe salt? That's what he asked him. Knowing full well that salt doesn't need to be tithed. So he makes himself look like a religious guy. He wants to give tithes out of salt. So he goes and asks his father a question that makes him look good, knowing that his father's going to tell him, you don't have to tithe salt. But he's making his father think that he's such a religious guy. That was Esav. He was a deceiver. Not only was he no good, a terrible person, but he made his... So Yitzchak had this impression, perhaps, that he wasn't as bad as people say he is.
So Yitzchak felt that he legitimately deserved those
Yeah. At one level. And the fact that his wife started worshipping idols, Yitzchak probably said to himself, is something that he can't control. First you have to understand, those days it's not like today. Everyone worshipped idols then. Who was Esav supposed to marry if not an idol worshipper?
But you mentioned
everyone did.
But you mentioned the difference where Abraham sent Eliezer out of.
But she was also an idol worshiper. She also came from an idol worship family.
Whereas Yitzchak did not do this.
Where should he send him to? To Leah. To Lavan. So he sent Yaakov to Lavan. Indeed he did. But Esau didn't ask him. Esau didn't ask him who to marry. The point was that he's cutting him some slack, even though his wives are worshipping idols. Right. He's not blaming Esau for it. Why? They're not. He probably wants to stop them, but they're not listening to him. He didn't blame Esau for it 100%. So in Yitzchak's eyes,
took a wife.
Yeah, so he took a wife, exactly. In his eyes, Esau wasn't so bad. Therefore, he wants to bless him. Hashem feels it's a waste. Why couldn't you just tell him in a vision? Esau is not good. Don't bless him. What does he do instead? Makes him blind for 57 years in order not to say one bad word against Esau. Can you imagine that? The lesson over here, I have to be careful. Who's Esau? Esau is a man that is Jewish indeed, but he's a person that went away from the Jewish way. He's not a very nice man. Nevertheless, God is careful not to say a word against him, to disparage another person, if you don't have to. Instead, he makes his father blind for 57 years in order for him to be able to get the blessing of at least not to say one negative word against another person. The lengths you have to go to make sure not to speak about another person is the lesson of this whole story. This could have been dealt with no problem. God could tell Yitzchak, don't give the blessings to Esau, he's not good. Oh, but after then I have to say negative about someone. I don't want to do that. I'd rather do it in this way where no one over here is being spoken of. That's how bad Lashon Hara is. That's how bad gossip is. Speak about another person, God finds it more worthy to deprive Yitzchak of quality of life at the end of his life, a third of his life. He's deprived of quality of life for almost 60 years, a third of his life, but not to say negative words against his son Esau. Imagine that. So imagine us, now we're talking about Jews that live after the Torah was given, where every one of us has a neshama, and we have Torah mitzvahs, and every Jew does Torah mitzvahs. And we so easily gossip and talk about other people. Look what God did in order not to say one negative word about who? About an Esau. How much more so we have to be careful not to say negative words, Lashon Hara, about anyone. Which is an amazing thing if you think about it. Yitzchak goes blind for 57 years so that Hashem shouldn't have to say Lashon Hara about Esau. It's unbelievable.
One of your lessons, you said that Esau actually was very, very careful about kibbut av.
Yes, it's true.
He loved his father.
That is true, yeah.
So he had a good quality.
In that merit.
He had merits, there's no question about it. Esau had merits, 100%.
So we can't say that really Esau was bad.
He had one good thing, that he honored his parents, and because of that he was rewarded very, very handsomely. But in everything else he was no good.
Maybe, but that's why Hashem.
Maybe that's the reason.
You know what
it
I
could
mean?
be.
Because of this, Hashem
Could be.
said, at least he has something.
Maybe.
But,
But the bottom line is Hashem doesn't want to say one negative word about it. Instead, he feels that it's better to make his father blind for so many years rather than to speak Lashon Hara about Esau.
Not only that,
So you're saying that maybe it's because Esau had this great merit.
Because
granted, I'll go along with
Hashem
that.
wants to show us even one thing that you do that is correct. I give you.
But imagine today Jews. Today Jews have more than one merit.
That's right.
Every Jew has many mitzvahs. The Talmud says that every Jew, even the most sinful of Jews, is packed with mitzvahs like a pomegranate is packed with seeds. So who's not meritorious? Everyone is meritorious. So we have no right to speak against Lashon Hara about anyone. I mean, if you think about this, this is the reason why God didn't speak against, and made him blind. He didn't want to tell Yitzchak that he's no good. Maybe not to make Yitzchak feel bad. Whatever the reason is, but he didn't speak Lashon Hara against Esau. This is an incredible lesson for us. How careful we have to be not to say a negative word about another person. if we don't have to.